Sure, you should split it up in a way that the 2NC does not answer every argument. Normally, lots of people in the US spend lots of time on the arguments that were less covered. So if you spend 2 minutes in 2AC, I might spend 6 minutes in 2NC on that.
So it's like, if they spend like a little bit of time, you just spend like more time on it, so don't waste your time.
Sure, like you need to pick and choose what you're going to go for. So maybe you kick the disadvantage or kick the counter plan, which we should definitely go over today. There's a pen. Would you mind picking that up? Hey, can I see your pen for a second? Who here knows how to kick a disadvantage? Not go for. Alright. We'll go over that today. That's very important. There are also structural ways to split the block. So you don't want to give the 1NR all like bad arguments because you're the 2N. Does that make sense? So and there are structural like positions that the speeches will take. For instance, the 1NR will normally go for one argument, like one position. No more, no less. Just because they invest 5 minutes in making one thing the most credible option possible in debate. If you go for a critique in the 2NC, a lot of times this is topicality in the 1NR. A lot of times when the 2NC goes for a T and a counterplan, it is a disadvantage in the 1NR. But you make it strategic. A lot of times the 1NR answers theory. Why do you think this is, Christy? Why do you think the 1NR answers theory? Alright, if the first thing I do in the 2NC is answer conditionality is bad, with conditionality is good, they have like 20 minutes now to prepare conditionality bad, right? And they can win the whole debate on conditionality bad, right? So put it on the top of the 1NR. Questions? That was a good question.
Okay, next.
George, question. What'd you say?
Okay, next person who's got their questions down. I said it's got to be written. Okay, Heidi?
What is the best way to structure the last two speeches?
You want to put your offense before your defense. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is, let's say I go for a counterplan and a disadvantage. I'm going to talk about the disadvantage first. Why? Anybody? Can I win the debate with just the counterplan? No. I need a net benefit to the counterplan. So I go for the net benefit first in case I don't finish the counterplan. Because if I don't finish it, I just go for the disadvantage. The other answer in this is that your offense should come before your defense. What do I mean by this? Yeah.
Like, you can't win by defense.
Sure. So if the negative says global warming is bad, you can't win the debate by saying, well, it's not so, like, you can, but you can't win the debate necessarily by saying global warming is not that bad. Does that make sense? because there's always a risk that global warming is bad, which means you need to put offensive reasons first. And then you can go for your defensive reasons.
Next. Did that answer your question? Can you say thank you? Okay, next. Anyone else? Jimmy?
If you didn't refute and introduce enough evidences in the case,
I can't hear you.
so if you didn't refute and introduce enough arguments in the 2AC, the negative block totally destroys your case and puts in a lot more errors. Well, how do you say? How do you categorize this so that you can
In this unique instance, I would find something new that the negative block said and read offense against it. One of the debates that I'm most proud of, because I cut the evidence for this, is at the Harvard round robin, which the top 16 debaters are or the top 16 teams in the US are invited to debate each other. My team debated the #1 team in the country, and after the negative block, we were getting destroyed. Like no chance of winning. The problem is that they read a new impact scenario in the 2NC, saying that war with Russia was bad. And my team spent the entire 1AR saying that war with Russia was good. And we beat the top team in the nation
So
on Russia war is good. And my debater ended up being the top speaker at the Harvard round robin because of that. So the answer is if you're getting destroyed, find something new and sort of impact or link turn it to get offense. Do you want to win? Do you like winning? All right. Well, find a way to win. You know, maybe you have to make a bunch of new arguments. Maybe that's not theoretically legitimate, but you sure as heck should try, shouldn't you?
thank you.
Next. You should have all this prepared already. Okay, George, and then Yvonne.
George,
What kind of structure can we use in the negative block?
structure?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. You're gonna see 2NCs that are T, the counter plan, and case arguments, and the 1 will be a disadd. Does that make sense? You'll see 2NCs that are case and the disadd, and 1Rs that are the counter plan. You'll see 2NCs that go for 8 minutes of the critique, and the 1R will go for 5 minutes of T. You will see negative blocks that go for 13 minutes of the critique. I have
13 minutes.
13. That's what I did.
That let you win. Did you win?
And we only spent like 90 seconds on it in the 2NC, or in the 1NC. So it's all about strategy, right? But it's what you think is strategic, and you want to split it right. There's a fine balance between extending lots of things and extending fewer things better, right? You sort of want to toe the line in between those two. Like, you don't want to extend everything, but in most circumstances, you probably won't just extend the capitalism critique.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yvonne?
I'm going to ask about cross-examination too. In cross-examination, when we get bad answers, should we wait to talk about that in our last speech or tell them that they are wrong and that instance?
The answer is that you should always talk about cross-examination in your speech, especially if it's a concession that gets you somewhere in the debate. A lot of people don't do this, and I don't like it. A couple judges, probably between 10 and 15, probably none that you will have, flow cross-examination. I flow cross-examination. It's very weird. I flow cross-examination. Just because sometimes, like, personally, I don't want to, if it comes down to something that's said in cross-examination, I want to have a record of that. And I just don't want to try to remember what I said. Especially when it's like a he said, she said, he said, she said, he said. Sort of like very contested, no one knows what's going on. Like what happens if you don't flow cross-examination? The cross-examination of the 1NC says it's conditional, and then in the 2NC they say it's unconditional. You don't have a record of that, so that's why I flow cross-ex, and it's probably why you should integrate cross-ex into your speech more if you can. Especially if you do what I was saying yesterday with the reverse pit of doom to pin them down into something that they normally wouldn't want to be pinned down in. Like Michael yesterday when he beat me on 5 conditional counterplans being legitimate. Yeah, and his friends admitted at dinner that they just voted for him for no reason, right? Right? Yeah?
Thank you. Who's next?
Can I ask a judge question?
Yeah.
Sure.
When you were being a judge and you see two sides, both sides, and like affirmative, they raise their way of constructing the speech. They say inherency first and harm and solvency. And then negative say maybe they try to attack or rebut back, but their way of constructing is similar. Say, for example, one put global warming, affirmative put global warming under their solvency.
Yes.
But disadvantage, negative say, maybe put it somewhere disadvantage or inheritance.
Sure.
So as a judge, do we try to deduct point because they mismatch to their contention, or should we try our best to match?
I probably wouldn't deduct points as long as it's interactive in the debate on the 2 issues. The other thing is that a lot of American cases are structured very different. The inherency and the solvency will be built in to the harms, and they'll just read multiple harm scenario that each have their own inherency and solvency, which might seem kind of, as foreign to you as Taiwan is to me.
What would you do if your opponent brought up a critique you never prepared for or heard of?
The double bind permutation. I probably have some generic critique answers. In the capitalism critique that we are working on, does it work within the government? The alternative. Alan, yes or no? The violent revolution happens to the government, right? So you can read evidence, and it should be in your critique file, as to just why working within the system or the government or through political avenues is good. The alternative doesn't do that, the affirmative does. Vote for the affirmative. A lot of critiques will also try to wish away your impacts. Does that make sense? Or wish away the affirmative. It's like you don't really happen, the affirmative never happens. It's what you justify, like my mind thinking in this debate. Don't let them do that. Be like, no, I'm AF, I get the AF, my impacts to the AF. If I don't get my impacts to the half, why did a 1AC happen? If the 1AC didn't happen, how does the affirmative ever win a debate? Is it the affirmative's debate? Is it the affirmative's choice as to whether or not they get their impacts or not? Does the affirmative have a choice in deciding what the issue of the debate is? Because they get to read a specific plan text, right? And defend it. The negative should not get to decide the avenue for the debate. Why is this fair? Who's heard of switch side debate? Switch side. Switch side debate, who's heard of it? Do you do switch side debate?
Suicide chess.
Jeremy, do you do switch side debate? George, do you do switch side debate? You don't? What kind of debate do you do? Yeah. You get to be affirmative and negative, right? Right? You're not always affirmative. As sweet as that would be. Right? You get to choose what you do half of the time. You get to choose half the time, I get to choose half the time. That's fair. Agreed? Maybe? Who here, when they get to the finals of the TDA tournament, they win the coin flip, what side are you going to choose? No, not heads or tails. If you win, are you going to choose affirmative or negative?
Negative.
How many people are going to choose negative?
More counterplan.
You all are crazy.
No, we wanted to do
Why would you choose negative?
affirmative
What?
I can avoid counterplan.
So you want to be negative so people can't run counterplans against you?
And you could run counterplans.
They want to run counterplans.
Who wants to be affirmative? Chrissy, why do you want to be affirmative?
Because, like, the affirmative starts the debate, so it's like it leads the whole debate.
What else do they do? If they start the debate, they also
And the debate.
end it. So I get to choose what the debate is on, and I get to give the last speech where I frame what happens in the debate. Who doesn't want to be affirmative? Who would ever choose negative? I get the last speech.
Exactly. Then it seems like you always win.
The affirmative has a higher win percentage too, historically. I want the last speech. I want the last word the judge is going to hear to be out of my mouth. No doubt. I don't see a circumstance personally in which I'm in a debate that is a coin flip that I ever say I want to be negative. Ever. But that's me. And I'm not a 2A. I was a 2N. Because all the 2N's want to go neg and all the 2A's want to go af, right? I was a 2N and I was like, let's go af. I like it. Oh, let's give the last speech. You know, they say something, I'll answer it, and they don't get to answer it. Tough luck, I'm af. But you know, tomorrow in finals, George will probably flip neg. Right, George? And you'll lose to Michael because all his friends will vote for him.
But we're not going to have voting.
How many people in here watch the final round? Everybody? Can I make a suggestion? You should act like you're judging those debates. Why do I say that? I feel like when I judge debates, it makes me a better debater. I feel like if I could debate now after judging like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of debates, that it gives you some sort of vision, right? It allows you to like take a bar graph of the debate and sort of like spread it out. So like, if this is the debate, after judging debates, it allows me to kind of, you know, do this. And then once I do this, I can actually make sense of everything and how they interact with one another, rather than just taking it on face value that this is true. Right? Does that make sense? There are so many times where I judge a debate and I look up and I'm like, why in the world is Alan saying something that is so irrelevant to the debate for a minute and a half? Like, there is no way what he is saying factors whatsoever into my decision. He's just like talking. Right? It's like, that's not important. But you only know that once you judge debates, because debaters are stubborn, more stubborn than most people, which, you know, isn't a bad thing. But you have to be strategically stubborn. Anyone else?
Thank you. Anyone next? Who's next? Who hasn't gone yet? You're all gonna go once, right?
She's definitely avoiding me, so she has to ask the next question.
Like, what if your opponent says that you dropped an argument in 2AC, but then you try to make it up in 1AR, and then your opponent calls you abusive? Is there any way you can make up for it?
Abuse good? Not really. Even if statements, interact it with other things, be like, so what? I conceded it. This thing still outweighs. Be like, oh, I meant to concede that argument, you know? I tricked you, Jedi mind trick, you know? These are not the droids you are looking for, you know? Yes, I conceded the disadvantage because I knew you weren't going to answer conditionality right, and I just beat you. I sweep the floor with you. Deal with it.
Wait, I have another question.
Yeah.
Like, just now you answered Michael's question by saying, like, you should answer it with double bind permutation.
Yeah.
But double bind permutation is just some kind of theoretical argument.
Yeah. Either the alternative solves or it doesn't. Either the alternative is so strong that it solves the residual link to the affirmative, or the link is so strong that the affirmative would never solve it. So it sort of causes the critique debater to toe the line as to how strong the link is and how hard and how big the alternative is. And this is extremely important because most critique debaters will say the link and the alternative both are very strong. So you're like, which one is it? Can't be both. If the link is strong, your alternative can't solve it. If the link is weak, the alternative does solve it. So the permutation either solves, the critique either doesn't solve, or the permutation resolves the critique.
Next. You all have a question, don't you?
Yeah.
What do you do if you're negative and the affirmative comes
I can't hear you.
If you're negative and the affirmative commutes your counterpart in 2AC, should you make it up and negative as well?
Yeah, answer it.
Like, say you didn't write it.
I'd probably say it links to the disadvantage, or either it links to the net benefit, or it's theoretically illegitimate, right? All right, Michael, come here. We're gonna debate. Maybe I'll win this time. All right, Michael, you read the Europe counterplan. Here, sit down. You read the Europe counterplan. in the 1NC. Alright? I'm gonna make one answer in the 2AC. Alright? Permutation, do the counter plan. Alright, you do 2NC. Okay. 1AC, the USFG should do Discover. Alright? 1NC, spending disadvantage, and Europe should launch Discover. My only answer I make in the whole 2AC is permutation, do the counter plan. Yeah, what would you say? What would you say to my only 2AC answer?
To do the counter plan?
Yeah,
The counter plan was good, so
but I do the counter plan.
What?
I do the counter
Oh,
plan.
you do the counter
Yeah, that's my permutation. I do the counter plan.
plan. Like, you work with Europe to do the counter plan?
No, Europe does it.
Europe does.
Yeah, permutation, Europe does it. It's all in that benefit.
It's gonna create those groups.
Why? Europe does it. I'm doing what you're doing now.
Because Europe's, wait, I see.
Yeah, Europe's awesome. What's your point? Europe does it.
No, I'm saying that my complex.
Alright, sit down. Who has any idea what the answer to this is? Yeah.
Can you say that Europe is in a deficit?
No, but then I do.
I'm Europe though. You just ran a disadvantage against yourself.
Yeah.
Concede it.
Exactly.
Done.
I see that.
Wait, what does
Done.
that
But he's gonna do my counter plan.
Yeah.
That's all.
My permutation is do the counter plan.
And I can't
Yeah.
say anything
Well, it's
bad in it.
conditional, say that.
All permutations are conditional.
Then just say you if your counter plan is conditional, you can just
If you can drop the counter plan, I should be able to read as many permutations as I want. Yeah, Eugene. No, Yvonne.
it's not reasonable because Europe does not have as much technology.
Alright, I'll concede that your counter plan doesn't solve now. My plan's better.
So then
You
your
can't type the counter plan. That means
Yeah. What?
You totally dropped your affirmative.
Yeah, what did I do?
Oh,
What
you
is a legitimate permutation?
combine your letters.
A legitimate permutation
Alright, go.
is all of the plan and part or all of the counterplan. Is my permutation legitimate?
No.
Why?
Because you got your.
Because I just did all of the counterplan, right? Two types of permutations that are illegitimate. The first one, which I made, is called severance. What do you think this is?
Say illegitimate, right? We say it's illegitimate.
It's illegitimate because it's severance. What does severance mean? Yeah, you don't do all of the plan. I did the discover part of the plan with my permutation. I didn't do the United States federal government part. Is that fair to you? Have you been abused? Probably. Alright. Yeah.
Depending on which side,
The affirmative
affirmative.
makes a severance permutation.
So like, if the president combines the negative part with the affirmative part, like European and the federal government,
That's
the
fine.
negative go like, it'll be okay.
Counterpoint, permutations don't have to be topical. What? Severance probably isn't a reason to lose the debate. It's a reason to reject the permutation. Now, I'm gonna hold off on your question for a second. There's a second type of permutation that's legitimate. Intrinsic. Hey, Michael. Come here. We're gonna do it again. Alright, same 1 and C. Alright? Permutation, the United States federal government and Taiwan should launch Discover. Or Taiwan should launch Discover is my permutation.
What about United States?
The United States federal government and Taiwan should launch Discover. What did I do? Yeah. I added something that was not all of the plan or part or all of the counter plan. So intrinsic means that I add some random thing, or maybe not random, onto the counter plan. Just like, all right, I'm gonna add a bunch of things on. You know, Russia should do it too. Maybe we'll launch another satellite. Maybe we'll, you know, dig a hole. Right?
So what's your assumption is, your plan, affirmative plan is the US should do it, right? And the counter plan says Europe.
Yes, the counter plan says Europe. My permutation is the United States and Taiwan should do it. Taiwan is not in the plan or the counter plan. I just randomly added it on, which is intrinsic because it adds on something that's not in the plan or the counter plan. That's illegitimate. So an example of a legitimate permutation, right? Would be, okay, here's an example. Can you permute this? Who's seen telephone poles? Alright? My plan has 3 people, right? One of the people digs the hole, one of them puts the telephone poles in, and one of them fills it back in the hole with the telephone pole. My counter plan says that the dude who puts the pole in is sick, but the other people should still go to work. So one person digs the hole and the other person fills it back up. Alright? Can you permute that? Can you permute that? No, you can't, because the affirmative always has to include the person who puts the pole in, right? So a severance permutation would say, all right, we're not. Permutation, the affirmative no longer advocates the dude who puts the pole in the ground should be there. Fire that dude, right? Fire that dude is also what? Is it intrinsic? Did the counter plan fire him? How about permutation? Dig the hole, put some flowers in, and then cover it back up. Does that sever 2 things? And it's also intrinsic. It severs because the pole's no longer there, and it adds on that we put the flowers in the ground. Is that fair? Why not? Could you predict that I'm going to put flowers in the ground? What if I was like, instead of flowers, we should, bury people? Their head will be sticking up out of the ground like in the sand. What if I'm like, bury a watch? What if I say, plant a laptop? Like, you can't predict that, can you? Is that fair then? Does the negative win any debates? in which intrinsic permutations are allowed? Do they? Probably not. Not fair. Is it educational? We went into that on conditionality as to why those two things were, pretty important. Alright?
So we educate judges. Whenever we say commute it, and then negative stand up and fluency said no, it's not.
It's not legitimate. It's not. It's severance, and that's not fair. And if debate's not fair, people quit. So would you still dig the hole if the dude who put the holes in was sick? Alright, good answer. Other questions?
Who's next? Thank you. Derek?
If we answer our opponent's argument and then the opponent says that we dropped it into AR, and the judge doesn't. So if we answer our opponent's argument, then
Alright, good.
and then the opponent says that we dropped it into AR.
Yeah, just be like you're lying.
But then what if the judges also think that we?
They're a bad judge.
So
I mean, okay, let's say I'm debating you, and he's really adamant. It's like, he conceded my number 3 and this and this and this and this. I'm gonna get up there and be like, flowing 101 embedded class means I don't have to theoretically answer everything. This argument still takes it out. Even if I conceded it, this is more important. But I didn't concede it. I'm sorry that you can't flow. Right? Look the judge in the face. Be like, Miss Chen, if you think you have this answer on your flow, don't believe what he's saying. If you have this word, that's what my answer is. Right? And if you don't, well, that's a different story. But don't say that.
Thank you. Next. Demi?
If your critique is conditional, can you have as many critiques as you want and still be fair to the person?
Same as counterclaims.
As many as you want.
I mean, you could, it's arguable. I would say you probably never have more than one critique. Just because they contradict one another. Think about this too. It's different when your conditional options are contradictory and not contradictory, isn't it? It's different if you have two conditional counterplans that do not contradict each other than a counterplan and a critique, or two counterplans that contradict one another. Right? Yeah? What if I read the capitalism critique and the Europe counterplan and say the spending this ad and economic growth is good? So I criticize economic growth and I say it's good. But it's conditional. Deal with it. I saw that smile on your face, George.
Hayan, I'll get to you later. Hayan, I'll get to your question later. Because there are people who hasn't gone yet. Okay, Baran, your question. Thank you.
If you're answering multiple with 2AC, is there any way possible that you can answer it?
If you don't answer it,
Yeah.
you probably lose.
Like, is there any way that you can answer it without losing?
I mean, anything is possible. I would say think about your case. Like, does the case outweigh the counterplan? Are the impacts of the case more important?
Okay, thank you. Jehi?
Alright, I'm gonna make you come over here. No. Your critique can be anything you want, you know? You're wearing a blue shirt with lots of colors on it. That's bad. Rainbows are evil. You know? You sit at the teacher's desk. That's bad. The lights are on. I mean, like, these are obviously extreme examples that no one reads. But anything is possible. A critique is a very loose argument in the US.
Okay, thank you. Eugene?
When you said something irrelevant, like during your speech, and then how should we fix it, and is there any possible chance to do it?
I mean, I think I've answered this a little bit, but the first answer is don't say irrelevant things. The second thing is just like, think of ways you could win the debate. You know? I mean, this probably in no circumstances is legitimate, but be like, you know, I know I made new arguments in my 2NR, and you should allow my new arguments, but they can give a 7-minute 2AR. It's fair now, isn't it? Don't ever do that. But, example, right? Did that make it fair? It's arguing.
What was your question, Eugene? I didn't hear you.
Oh, like you said something irrelevant, like how should we fix it? Like, is there any chance to do it?
What?
When you said something irrelevant, and then like how should we fix it? And is there any
Oh,
chance?
okay, thank you.
I mean, the answer is just like foresight. Don't say things that are irrelevant. Things that are irrelevant are irrelevant.
Okay, thank you. Angela, Angela, have you gone? Okay, who has not gone yet? Yvonne? Yvonne gone? Okay,
I don't think Jimmy's
Ellen?
gone.
Jimmy has. Ellen, your question. Okay, Jeremy.
When the negative brings up a term that I've never heard of, is it better to delete it or attack it?
You should do anything and everything possible. Throw the boat at it. You know? Throw some stuff against the wall and see what sticks. You don't know what it is, you know? Maybe something will stick. Maybe it all will stick. Maybe it won't stick, and then you have to write answers to it for next round. You know? Your app is Discover. Eugene is like, we should do some jumping jacks counter plan. Like, yeah, you probably don't have anything to say against that. Exercise is bad. I don't know if you have that in it. Yeah, I mean, you can repeat that. You know? But launching Discover doesn't have jumping jacks, you know?
Okay, Ellen, I think you're the only person.
If you say like a conditional value,
Conditional.
critique in 2MC, and then you put it in.
You can't read a critique of the 2NC. No. You should bring every off-case position into the debate in the 1NC. I don't think there are any circumstances in which you are allowed to read a new off-case in the 2NC. But, you know, that's kind of the norm.
Okay, Christy?
If you're losing really badly, how can you make like a really powerful rebuttal speech that can make people do?
Go for the case. Go for the act. Just be like, I lose everything. Here's why you still vote for me. Right? That's when those like even ifs come into play. Even if Jeremy wins every argument that he goes for, how do I still win? And these are the things you should be thinking about come 2NR, 2AR. Right? Even if they say, even if capitalism is bad, you know, what I say is still more important. You know? Even if pens are better than pencils, a pencil can still write. They still do the same thing. It's not competitive.
Okay, Hyun had another question.
Can we return it, connect to the common plan you have?
Yes. It's conditional.
Does it have to be conditional?
No. I could go one off case position and the one on C critique. Bring it. 2 off, T and critique. Bring it. Critique's unconditional. So it's not, T is a prior issue, which means I'll go for T in the critique, and you can't say any theoretical objections to it. This is what I used to do. And then I would go for T. Get tired. Yeah.
What if your opponent says that their counterplan is unconditional? How are you supposed to do a sacrifice?
I mean, normally you don't say unconditionality is bad. Normally it's like also it's unconditional impact turn, impact turn, impact turn.
So you just keep on giving.
Sure. If they want to go for it, I'm gonna stick them with that counter plan as hard as possible. Because then I don't have to answer the disad. It's like, all right, they have to go for the counter plan. That pressures the 2NR because they have to go and answer all of your turns on the counter plan. And today we're going to go over how, like, we went over what impact turns and link turns are. Today we're going to go over those. And you have seen me impact turn your stuff before. How many people said capitalism, heat of space colonization in their mini debates? A few, right? You did, didn't you? What did I say?
It was nasty. It's the Cossack solution.
Sure, I impact turned. I was like, I'll concede capitalism is key to space colonization. Space colonization is, you know, the worst thing since the invention of Tetris friends. Anyone else? Yeah.
If your counterplan only then gets rid of parts of the permitted block issues, and you have another counterplan, you can also take out the rest of the permitted block issues.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You can have multiple counterplans. In fact, we'll take a 2-minute break, and I'm going to show you some flows of debates I've judged this year.
Thank you.